Most people who get vertigo are told it's just crystals moving around in their ear. Take some motion sickness pills, do a head maneuver, and hope for the best. But what if I told you the real reason those crystals broke loose in the first place has nothing to do with your ear? What if the actual root cause is a deficiency that over 1 billion people worldwide are walking around with right now, and almost nobody is connecting it to their vertigo? That changes things. Because once you understand why this happens at the cellular level, you can stop chasing symptoms and start fixing the actual problem. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly what to do right now, today, to get immediate relief while you address what's really going on. Let's start with the basics. The most common type of vertigo is called BPPV. That stands for benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. Fancy medical terminology for a pretty simple concept. Inside your inner ear, there are tiny calcium carbonate crystals. They're supposed to be there. They serve a purpose. But sometimes they break free from where they belong and drift into parts of your ear canal where they should not be. When that happens, every time you change position, bend over, roll over in bed, or tilt your head, those loose crystals send false signals to your brain. Your brain thinks you're spinning when you're perfectly still. That's vertigo. Now here's what makes your inner ear so interesting. You have what is essentially a biological 3D gyroscope sitting inside your skull. It tells your brain exactly where you are in space, whether you're moving, tilting, accelerating, or standing still. Sound waves enter the ear and hit a thin membrane that converts those vibrations into mechanical signals. But deeper inside, past the hearing apparatus, sits this vestibular system. 3 semicircular canals oriented in different planes, filled with fluid. When you move your head, the fluid shifts, and tiny hair cells lining those canals detect the motion. These hair cells are insanely sensitive, and they need to be. Your brain depends on split-second accuracy from this system to keep you balanced and oriented. To boost that sensitivity, your body does something clever. It embeds those hair cells in a gel-like layer. And sitting on top of that gel are the calcium crystals we just talked about. They act as tiny weights, adding mass to the gel, so that even the slightest head movement creates enough force for the hair cells to detect it. Think of it like adding weight to a fishing line, so it sinks faster and catches more movement in the current. Without those crystals sitting in the right spot, the whole system loses precision. So these crystals aren't a problem. They're part of the design. The problem is when they come loose and end up floating around in your semicircular canals where they don't belong. Every time fluid moves through those canals, the loose crystals tumble around and drag across hair cells that were never meant to detect them. Your brain gets conflicting signals. One ear says you're spinning. The other says you're still. Your eyes say you're not moving. Your brain panics. You get dizzy, nauseous, and disoriented. Here's the question nobody seems to be asking. Why do the crystals break loose in the first place? Drop a comment if you've ever been told your vertigo is just something you have to live with. Because what I'm about to share completely contradicts that. Your body has a system designed specifically to keep those calcium crystals anchored exactly where they belong. There are specialized proteins called calcium-binding proteins. Their entire job is to hold calcium in the right place in your body. They're like molecular glue keeping those crystals locked into the gel layer of your vestibular system. When these proteins are working properly, the crystals stay put. When they're not, the crystals start drifting. So what controls these calcium-binding proteins? What regulates whether they do their job or not? Vitamin D3. That's right. Vitamin D3 is the master regulator of the proteins responsible for anchoring those crystals in place. When your vitamin D levels drop too low, those binding proteins don't function correctly. The anchoring system weakens. Crystals break free. Vertigo follows. And this isn't speculation. There is a solid body of published research connecting vitamin D deficiency directly to BPPV. One meta-analysis looked specifically at prevention of recurrent benign paroxysmal positional vertigo with vitamin D supplementation, and the results were clear. Adequate vitamin D levels significantly reduced the recurrence of vertigo episodes. This also explains a pattern that doctors have noticed for years, but rarely explain. Postmenopausal women have a significantly higher risk of developing BPPV. What else happens after menopause? Vitamin D metabolism changes dramatically. Estrogen plays a role in vitamin D activation, and when estrogen drops, vitamin D utilization drops with it. The connection is right there if you're willing to look. Now, here's why some of the research on vitamin D and vertigo seems mixed. It comes down to dosage. Most studies that show weak results are using the standard RDA recommendation. That's 600 IUs per day. 600. That number was established as the bare minimum to prevent rickets in children. It was never designed to optimize adult health, let alone address a complex condition involving calcium regulation in the inner ear. The research that shows strong positive outcomes uses much higher doses. We're talking about a maintenance range of at least 6,000 to 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 per day. At those levels, your body has enough raw material to properly activate the calcium-binding proteins, rebuild the crystal anchoring system, and keep those crystals locked in position. There's more to this than just popping vitamin D, though. There are two other nutrients that complete this picture, and skipping either one is a mistake. First is magnesium. Vitamin D literally cannot function without adequate magnesium. Magnesium is required for the enzymatic conversion that activates vitamin D in your body. You can swallow 10,000 IUs of D3 every day, but if your magnesium levels are low, a significant portion of that vitamin D sits inactive. It never gets converted into the form your body actually uses. On top of that, magnesium is one of the master controllers of calcium in your entire body. It regulates where calcium goes, how much gets absorbed, and how it behaves at the cellular level. Magnesium deficiency alone has been independently linked to vertigo symptoms in separate research. The second nutrient is vitamin K2. K2 acts as a traffic controller for calcium. It tells your body where calcium should be deposited and, just as important, where it should not be. Without adequate K2, calcium tends to accumulate in places it doesn't belong. It builds up in arteries, in joints, in soft tissue, and it potentially fails to stay anchored in places where it's supposed to be, like the gel layer of your vestibular system. There isn't as much direct research on K2 and vertigo specifically, but the biochemical logic is sound. K2 directs calcium placement. Vertigo is a calcium placement problem, so the protocol is straightforward. Vitamin D3 at a minimum of 10,000 IUs daily, magnesium in a bioavailable form like glycinate or threonate, and vitamin K2 in the MK7 form for the longest half-life and best tissue distribution. Take all three consistently. Now, important reality check. This is a root cause approach, not a quick fix. You're rebuilding a biological anchoring system that has degraded over months or years of deficiency. Depending on how depleted you are, you might start feeling improvement in a week. For others, it could take 2 to 3 weeks or longer. The key is consistency. Don't take vitamin D for 4 days, feel no change, and quit. That's not how nutritional repletion works. So what do you do in the meantime while you're addressing the root cause? You use the Epley Maneuver. It's a simple physical technique you can do at home that mechanically moves the loose crystals out of your semicircular canals and back toward where they belong. Here's how it works. First, you need to identify which ear is affected. Sit on a bed or table. Turn your head 45 degrees to the left and lie back so your head hangs just slightly below horizontal, supported by the bed but past the edge of the pillow. Note whether you experience vertigo. Sit back up. Pause a few seconds. Then turn your head 45 degrees to the right and repeat. Whichever side triggers the vertigo is the affected ear. Now for the treatment. Let's say your right ear is affected. Sit on the bed, turn your head 45 degrees to the right, and lie back. Stay in that position until the vertigo stops. Then wait an additional 30 seconds. Next, slowly turn your head to the left, past center, until it's 45 degrees to the left. Wait for the vertigo to subside. Then another 30 seconds. For severe cases, extend that wait to a full minute at each position. Third position. Roll onto your left side with your head angled downward, about 45 degrees toward the table. Rest your head there. Wait for the vertigo to stop, then hold for another 30 seconds. Finally, sit up slowly at the edge of the bed, with your chin tucked down toward your chest. Stay here for at least 30 seconds, ideally a couple of minutes. Let everything settle. Let those crystals find their way back to a neutral position before you stand up and go about your day. This maneuver provides immediate relief for most people. Some need to repeat it a few times over several days. But the critical thing to understand is that the Epley Maneuver addresses the symptom. It moves crystals that have already broken loose. It does nothing to prevent them from breaking loose again. That's why you need the nutritional foundation. Vitamin D3, magnesium, and K2 together rebuild the system that keeps those crystals anchored permanently. Most people will never hear this from their doctor. They'll get a diagnosis of BPPV, maybe learn the Epley Maneuver, and be sent home with no explanation of why it happened or how to prevent it from coming back. Now you know both sides, the immediate fix and the long-term solution. If this changed how you think about vertigo, subscribe. We break down the health connections your doctor doesn't have time to explain, and we do it every single week.